This lesson we are looking at lipids, which is part of topic 2.3. Once again, topic 2.3 contains some information on carbohydrates as well as lipids. So be sure you understand exactly which dot points are relevant in this particular case. Okay, lipids are our fats and our oils, and they are insoluble in water, which means they are hydrophobic. Our fats are the ones that are solid at room temperature and liquid at 37 degrees. Oils are liquid at both 37 and room temperature. And we will be talking about the types of lipid tissue in our body as well. All right, lipids are made up of only carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens. Fatty acids are an unbranched hydrocarbon chain. We've had a chat about them before. So having a look at this here, the chain is made out of all of those carbons, but on the end here, we've got this COOH group, which is what classifies it as an acid. It's the carboxyl group. The chain, the big carbon or hydrocarbon chain, can vary in the number of carbons it's got, but it can also vary in whether there's single or double bonds. Now we can state straight away here, our saturated fatty acids are saturated with hydrogens. There's as many hydrogens as can fit based on the carbon having 4 available bonding sites. If we have a look here, these carbons are double bonded, and therefore it's actually missing out on an opportunity to bond to another hydrogen, which means it is unsaturated. It is not completely full of hydrogens like it could be. It's not just unsaturated versus saturated we need to watch out for. So here is our saturated fatty acid up here. It's only got the single bonds between the carbons, and here are our unsaturated here. But now we're going to differentiate between monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. Mono meaning one means it's only got one of those double bonds. Poly means it has multiple double bonds. Okay, so saturated versus unsaturated, and then within the unsaturated, does it have one double bond or does it have more than one double bond? Now the structure and function of these hydrocarbons make them very, very different. As with pretty much everything in biology, structure really helps function. Now, cis and trans are important words in chemistry when we're talking about the way that a molecule is structured, its physical shape. Cis in this case for a hydrocarbon means that when there's a double bond in an unsaturated fatty acid, those hydrogens are on the exact same side of those carbons that are bonded, okay? But on the trans situation, it's a cross. They are opposite one another. So the cis up here, it's got the C double bonded to a C, and the hydrogens are on the same side, as opposed to the C double bonded to the other C, and the hydrogen is on one side and the opposite carbon is on the opposite side. Now, trans fats are actually, there's only very few of them are found naturally in animal products, okay? Most are produced synthetically, and they have a really high melting point, and they're solid at room temperature. Mostly they're found in processed food. So we're starting to see evidence that suggests there are types. These are the types of fats to avoid. There's good fats and there's bad fats, and trans fats are bad ones, okay? So they increase the risk of heart disease and they increase cholesterol levels in the blood. Triglycerides are it's a different type of fat, not just like a fatty acid. It's actually something that multiple fatty acids make up. And a triglyceride is part of our adipose tissue in human. Adipose tissue is fat. So the oil in sunflower seeds is also made of triglycerides. And we've seen phospholipids, and we represented phospholipids with a head and 2 tails. Now we're looking at a triglyceride, and it's actually a head and sort of 3 tails, right? Hence the tri in its name. Okay, so here's a triglyceride in its molecular form. You can see this here is the glycerol, its backbone, you might say, and it's got your 3 tails coming out this way. Now, once that condensation reaction happens, it cleaves off the OH group from the glycerol and the H from the hydrocarbon, creating the water molecule, and it's going to happen 3 times, so that 3 fatty acids can stick to that glycerol, okay? And the bond that happens at this point is called an ester bond, and it's joining the carboxyl group, or the acid part of the fatty acid, onto the glycerol directly at the carbon in the center there. Now, triglycerides are excellent energy storers, okay? And they're also heat insulators. So, you know, I'm really prepared for winter because I've got quite a bit of fat on me or something like that. But we need to be able to distinguish between the energy that carbs or our saccharides or our polysaccharides provide us versus the energy that is found in fats. Okay, so again, we're changing those words around. Polysaccharides, carbohydrates, same thing. Adipose tissue, fats, lipids, same thing there as well. Now, the energy in fat, in 1 gram of fat, is almost twice that you can find in a polysaccharide. Okay, so 1 gram of fat versus 1 gram of, say, starch, you get twice as much energy out of the fat. Now, fat is a much lighter energy source because the fat molecules are hydrophobic, so they don't want to play with water, which means there's no water sticking around on them. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but if you're talking about sugars do hang on to that water, and therefore it makes it a heavier kind of mass. Now, body mass might not be as important for us, but if you're, say, a bird trying to survive in the wild, being really light is really important. So storing your energy as fat is more beneficial than storing it as a carbohydrate. Now, fats are really poor at heat conducting, which makes them really good insulators, which means you can warm your body really, really well. Fat is also kind of all the way through our body, and it's kind of encasing our organs. So it means it's a bit of a shock absorber, which doesn't sound like much, but if you're jumping up and down, there needs to be something holding it in place, and that's part of it as well. Right, but there is a big but here, that fats are difficult to break down, and our body usually relies on that stored glycogen, remembering that that glycogen is a carbohydrate, and the body will break that down first, right? So we always talk about energy and wanting to burn fat, but the only way you can burn fat is if you get rid of your stores of glycogen first, because that glycogen is the body's number one preference. Talking about body fat, body mass index, or your BMI, is something you've probably heard of, and I'm going to say it's an outdated way of determining whether someone is underweight, overweight, obese, all those kinds of things. It is your mass in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Now, that puts me in an overweight category, right? That puts me about here, and I say it's outdated because it needs to be used in conjunction with so many other measurements. You start going to the gym every day, you will build muscle. Muscle is very dense, but someone else who might have very little muscle but quite a lot of fat, that fat is very light, remember? So it might not be, this BMI, the best measure. You should be having a lot of other measurements and tests done. It also doesn't work for people who are pregnant, for people who are, say, elite athletes, whose ratios are a little bit different, because this is a ratio between your mass and your height. It doesn't also take on board people who might be, I'm going to call them fat skinny or skinny fat, right? Those people who are outwardly quite skinny but internally very unhealthy and have quite a lot of high fats in their bloodstream, in their cholesterol and all those kinds of things. And the opposite, someone who is quite big but has quite a lot of mass and is tracking really well on all the other statistics. A nonogram is pretty much the same thing. So you'd find your height and you'd find your weight and you'd join them up, and that's where you would be situated in. So green is the normal range, yellow is your overweight, and this is quite a lot of obese there. Okay. So again, these are our syllabus points, and this topic covers both carbohydrates and fat, so it's really important to differentiate between them and keep track of what you're learning.